We all set? Okay, good. Hey, thank you everybody for being on today. I know there's a few people that are still trying to join, and we'll kind of slow walk this at the beginning to make sure a few people can get in. If at any time you guys have a question or can't hear, or there's something going on that you don't understand or whatever, feel free to just put a chat into the chat system here, and somebody will pick it up. Either Marlon or David or I will pick it up and be able to kind of monitor those questions as we can and make sure you guys are getting the good experience. But thank you so much for joining us today. This is our 4th week in a row here of our lockdown webinar series. And of course, as things are starting to loosen up around Indiana and Indianapolis a little bit, we're still obviously working in a much different way than we have over the past several years, of course. And so what we wanted to talk about today is one of our core strengths as a company, but really do it more as an educational component, which is really owner's technical representation, kind of the what and why you might want that, or why you might want to encourage your client to take a look at that. My name is Tim Jensen, and I think there we go. My name is Tim Jensen. I'm a professional engineer, president of the Veridus group here. Really, and I'll get into more of the company a little bit, but born and raised Indianapolis, kind of been around here most of my life, went to Purdue, graduated from there in '99, and then went on to Wisconsin and was living in Wisconsin working for a developer for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and then moved back here to continue my career. David, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. David Rainey. I've been with Tim at Veridus Group, gosh, almost 8 years now, I believe it's been. I was one of the first people on board with Tim, and Purdue background, construction management, and yeah, born and raised here. So
just real briefly, for those of you who aren't familiar with our company and what we do, we are a group, right? And so we have 4 basic divisions that we work in and out of each and every single day. We have our construction services group, which is what we're going to talk mainly about today. We have our community economic development group. Many of you know Marlon Webb, who runs that for us. We have our civil engineering side, which does mainly site design work for private developers and more pseudo-governmental projects, but nothing in the public works sector. And then we have our building forensics group, which does a lot of property condition assessments, building enclosure commissioning, things like that. But today, we're really going to focus on the reason I started the company back in 2011, which really is our bread and butter, which is our owner's technical representation. It falls underneath our construction services group. We do all these other things that you see here and even more. And I think today what you're going to hear from us is that kind of more about what owner's technical representation really looks like in Central Indiana. And then David's going to go through a lot of anecdotal stories of some of our clients that we have currently and some of the ones in the past, and how we've been able to effectively manage situations and save dollars and provide value for our clients. So just a brief, real quick glimpse of some of our clients that are doing and using this service right now. As I was putting this together over the last few days, I realized I'm missing about 6 or 7 logos on here that I didn't want to resize everything to fit everybody on. But we've been really blessed to have been able to get this message out about what owner's technical rep is, how it works, how it's different than what may be already on the market, from what maybe some of the design firms and CM firms are offering. We'd be happy to answer questions on that as we get later. But as you can see, we've got a good sampling of both public and private clients that we're working with today. Recently, we just landed the Carmel Clay Public Library last fall, which is a pretty large project which we'll get into a little bit later. So what is an owner's technical rep? And I guess I should, I'm going to kind of lead this conversation from a play-by-play type analysis, and then David will give us some color commentary where needed, and just kind of jump in there. And Mark, if you're on too, Mark's on. He's our director of this construction services group. I may ask Mark to jump in on some of his projects very specifically with some stuff. But when we talk about an owner's technical rep with our clients, we're very specific in what we mean, not just project management. An owner's technical rep is someone who acts on the behalf of the owner, but has technical expertise in an area. So not just anybody can pick up and do it just because you can manage a project. But as an owner's technical rep, we really strive to make sure that all of our people have a diverse background in all of these things, whether it's development and construction, design, entitlements of the property, real estate in general, construction products and processes, We actually stay with our clients all the way through closeout, commissioning, and then even a year later in warranty. And so we believe that clients and owners, project owners, are probably the most underutilized resource on any given project. They're the ones who are providing the dollars. They're the ones who are providing the vision for what it is they want it to become, and of course the need. And so all too often, I think we've seen way too many design firms and construction firms just take advantage of the fact that owners don't know enough, and they try to just use their process or push their way on them. Don't give them enough guidance. Don't give them enough chance to speak back and talk about what their role really should be. And I think as owners, they just often get stuck writing checks instead of actually directing projects the way they should. And so that's why there's often a need for an owner's technical rep. David, jump in if you need to. So visually, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but visually, this is just kind of an example. Some people think, well, there's not that much for the owner to do. Well, in any given project, there's a lot for an owner to do, even outside of what the architect might do or the GC and CM might do. And while some of these things in the red bubbles around the owner's rep circle may fall into architect or GC category sometimes, there's a lot of things that just don't, that the owners end up having to do on their own they weren't aware of, or they have to hire additional services to kind of complete throughout the process. And so while your architect is going to carry all of the engineering and sub-consultants for design and code consultants and engineering and whatnot, and the GC is going to carry, of course, all the subcontractors, you know, there's lots of these other things that have to happen that we would always recommend go straight to the owner anyway, like materials testing. Maybe there's a landlord involved that's dealing with a lease situation, oftentimes dealing with the fire marshal, elected officials, and doing public meetings, zoning, whatever that is, utilities, signage, and then OFCI there, if you don't know what that means, that's owner, furnished, contractor, installed. We have found, and David can probably speak to this, but we have found this to be one of the largest gaps that often happens at the end of a project, where the owner ends up with all this equipment, whether it's IT equipment or AV equipment or just very specific equipment to their project, and say, okay, well, here this is. We brought it all to you, but the contractor was never carrying anything in that line item or budget to be able to install that. And so there's all kinds of gaps that show themselves during a project. And part of our job as an owner's rep is to make sure that those gaps are all filled, they're all taken care of, so that the owner at the end of the day is happy, is pleased they did the project, but at the same time doesn't feel like it was a burden on them the whole time, that they actually enjoyed the process. David, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just going to say, well, yes, actually, the couple things about the owner furnish, as far as the owner installing that equipment, that does come up on a lot of projects. Actually, there's several projects that I'm gonna go over that I've had to deal with that, and I've got several that are in process right now that we're already dealing with. We're a year away from it, and we're working on it. But I also wanted to mention too that there's a lot of things that, as being an owner's rep and working and being solely working with the owner, that we would do is just cover any of those early due diligence items to make sure that things aren't missed, that maybe the architect or the engineer didn't get covered. So I just wanted to add.
So we often get this question, right? Isn't our architect, engineer, or our CM, or our GC, or my best friend, or my uncle, or my brother, why can't they just be our own OTR? Why is that not possible? And just, it's really not that possible, especially in these contractual relationships. And here's why. There's 3 reasons, and we're going to go through each one of these more specifically. Number 1, just follow the money in the contract trail. And we'll show you that in a second as to why that's not the right relationship. Number 2 is architects, engineers, and CMs typically have very specific expertise in their own category, right? Architects are good at one thing, engineers are good at something, CMs, GCs, MEPs, etc. They all have their areas of expertise. And then third, these established subcontractor relationships sometimes can get in the way, and we'll explain more of that anecdotally. Let's follow the money here real quick. So one of the things that we help our clients do is understand contract and understand risk that goes along with the contract. So when a client comes in, we want to make sure that they have the right project delivery method, which we did our first webinar on, and we'll talk a little bit about it in a few minutes. But to understand that every relationship starts with a contract, right, which allocates the risk. And that risk then is directly related to the fee. So depending on how much risk somebody is willing to assume, the contractor, the designer, whoever it is, there's a fee that goes along with that. And we certainly want to pay people fees. There's no doubt about it. We would like to keep those as low as we can, but then also that can reallocate risk in certain things. So I'll tell you, as owners reps, we firmly believe that everybody in the project needs to make some money. Otherwise, we're going to have problems. And so we get the whole fee, which of course goes right to revenue and profit. And then fee keeps company in business. We know that. And so what we've seen with our businesses, though, is that they will tend to protect that revenue at all costs, whether it's through their E&O insurance claims or whatever the case is. They're going to try to protect that revenue, which of course pays their employees, which when you have employees, you need more contracts. And so it ends up being this circle. And when we follow the money around the circle, we understand that they're really, the owner isn't in this anywhere other than signing a contract and paying a fee. And that's it. They don't really get to be involved anywhere else. They're not overly concerned. And in the grand scheme of things, we're all concerned for our humankind and our brothers and sisters, but we're not overly concerned about, does that company stay in business forever, or how many employees do they have, or what's the next contract, or what, where does that go? And so we find this to be one of the reasons that an owner's rep is really, really important, as the owner's rep really should have a contract directly with the owner, and there's not this other concern about everything else that's going on in the deal. Number two, specific experience, right? So architects, clearly experts in building design, document assembly, interior design. They have a whole list of skills that they're very, very good at, and they've gone to school for, and they've taken the tests on. Same thing with engineers. As an engineer, I can tell you, I speak for many of us anyway, where I say we typically get laser focused on a specific discipline, right? So if somebody's a really good structural engineer, they're probably not a plumbing engineer. And if they're a really good mechanical engineer, they're probably not doing civil site design. So as engineers, they do get very laser focused on their specific discipline. The GC and CM, a little bit broader usually, because they're actually the ones installing the product in the field, or at least managing and overseeing that. But they have to understand estimating, scheduling, constructability, but they're also not going to be the ones that you call on to design your retaining wall, or to make sure that your structural system is good, or to design an MEP system. And so having specific expertise in all of these is good for these individual sub-consultants or consultants. But rarely, if ever, will you find your designer or your CM with the full body of technical experience to really represent a client throughout the entire project process, from the very beginning to the very end. Now, I know I can see the names on here. I know there's some of you that are contractors, that are CMs, that are GCs, and we can certainly have that conversation later. But it is our experience that we work very well with our GCs and our CMs that we work with all the time. In fact, we have a lot of CMs that actually bring us to projects and recommend us for our clients so that we can participate with them in the project and help the client along. So the third thing I mentioned as to why your designer or your CM may not be a good fit for the OTR is that they have established subcontractor relationships. And I don't want to make this sound like it's all bad, because it can be good. And the way this can be really good is we can get good participation for bidding. And this is certainly something we want, right? We want the CM to have relationships in the subcontractor market that make it good for bidding. But it also can be bad, and it can kind of create a conflict of interest. And this cartoon is somewhat funny, but kind of talks about just a conflict of interest a little bit, and where I'm going with this is we actually had a project, and we'll go through it later, but in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, where we had a CM that had an existing relationship with a few of the subs that were on there. One of the primary subcontractors was an electrical engineer, or was electrical contractor, responsible for all the electric work on the project. It came down to an issue, a change order issue and a delay issue with this particular contractor. And the CM firm would not be strong with them. They wouldn't be hard with them. So we finally had a meeting with the CM and said, hey, this one contractor is the reason that this project is behind schedule right now. We need them to be on site. What is it going to take to get them on site? And the CM very clearly told us, I understand your concern. I understand your problem. But if I really push hard on them here and make them to come off of another project, I have them on 4 projects right now, right? And so I don't want to lose or go behind on another project just so I can get you up to speed on this project. And we can have that conversation about whether that's a good construction manager or not. But the point is that they have established relationships with these subcontractors, and they were very, very concerned about pushing them too hard on a specific project and ruining relationship on multiple other projects, which, don't get me wrong, I totally understand that sentiment and I appreciate it to some extent. But at the end of the day, I am representing the owner. I'm not representing the electrical contractor or the CM. And our owner doesn't particularly care about the other 4 projects that are going on that might be delayed because of this. We know that we're behind right now and that we have to move this thing on. So again, established subcontractor relationships can be good, they can be bad, but it is something that definitely separates our firm, for one, because we're not CMs at all. We don't have those relationships with CM firms who also try to be owners' representatives. David, you got anything to add before I jump in here?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I think just the important point to take away from that, and I think you've hit it several times, but obviously the owner, the OTR should be solely representing the owner. And if you're a contractor, you're an architect, if you're designing, holding contracts, managing subs, it's really hard to fill that role truly as an owner's rep. And I think you mentioned this as well, but many times, you know, even if a contractor hasn't brought us in, we can stand in that gap between the architect and the CM and help resolve issues which come up all the time. And I think that's one of the important roles that we play, I mean, every day in our jobs. So,
yeah. So just a couple of slides here on why you might use an OTR and what our responsibilities are. So some of the reasons that we talk to our clients about why they might want or need an OTR would be free up staff time, right? If you're good at building widgets, that is your expertise. It's not developing a piece of property, building a building and getting it ready to build more widgets. We want your staff as the owner to be able to stay and build widgets or whatever it is that you guys do on a daily basis. So we want to free up, and oftentimes what we've found is that a company who's interested in doing a large project will assign a staff person or persons to that project, and that becomes almost their full-time job. Well, clearly they were doing something before the project, and they're probably gonna have to go back to doing something after the project. And so does it make sense to take that staff person and move them over when they could be focusing on something else? Now you're hiring specific expertise to supplement your staff, right? As an OTR, we bring that expertise, and most good OTRs do bring that expertise. And, you know, just like you would hire a doctor for a medical issue, an attorney for a legal issue, or whatever the case, I think it's a good practice to hire a construction expert in order to represent an owner during a construction project. This next one is one of the things our clients like the best about us is we create a single point of contact for all project matters. So everything flows through your assigned owner's rep, right? So you don't have the contractor, the designer, and the subcontractor and the engineer all calling different people on your team or your committee or it's in your company. You have one single point of contact where all things, as in the next bullet point, are filtered through that person. So as an OTR who's experienced, somebody can really filter unnecessary decisions and distractions away from the widget maker, so the widget makers can keep doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we can focus on this. And then the third thing, and we've had this conversation, or the fifth thing I should say, with several cities and towns who love political cover, is this gives them somebody to shift responsibility to a third party for the project, right? Is saying, hey, we hired Veridus to manage us and do this for us. And so if Veridus messes up, then of course we can be, you know, on the hook for whatever that discussion is. But really, it does give them some political cover. Okay. What can an OTR do for you or your clients, right? This one we talked about a few weeks ago. We can discern the most appropriate project delivery method, right? And I'll have David talk about that in a second. Number two, assist in the selection of the design and construction teams. So often we see people hiring relatives or doing political favors if it's in politics, or, you know, these guys have been the most aggressive. I just really want them to stop calling me, so I'm going to hire them to do something, which often is the loudest person is not always the right person, right? And so we want to make sure that our owners have selected the right team with the right experience and the team that works together well. And this goes for both design and construction. So we, as OTRs, manage all the public meetings and updates and communications of the projects, both up and down, so to the project team and to management and to the ownership group. Again, we filter those decisions to be made by leadership, so they're not necessarily brought every decision. So out of 100, we might bring them 40. And of those 40 decisions they have to make, we're going to make sure, in the next bullet point, that we're provided the important information so they can make informed decisions. They're never going to be asked to make a decision without feeling like they have enough information to do so. And the last thing for this one really is we become the first line of defense on contingency and change order issues. And we're probably going to do a whole nother webinar here in another month or two on contingency and change orders, because this is an area for our clients that comes up on every single project. And we take a pretty hard owner stance on this with our clients to make sure that everybody understands how contingency and change orders in our mind should be handled. David?
Yeah, I'll go through the delivery method more in depth on some of the examples I'm going to bring up, but that is just it seems to be extremely important these days. Just about every project, at least several of the major projects that we've had recently, the delivery method has been something that has come up as an important piece. There's several projects that choosing the wrong delivery method can make or break the project. We've gone in and actually had to scrap, basically shut it down and rebid the project under a different delivery method on several projects. So, and the other thing too is if you're going to, and I know there's several, possibly a couple contractors on here, and I think this is a fair statement, but a CM is going to recommend to an owner probably a delivery method that they're used to delivering, whether it's a CMA, CMC, which is fine, except that might not be the right delivery method for the owner. So what we strive to do, no matter what, is we look at all the variables, including obviously the project, the cost, how it's being funded. We look at the stakeholders, the risk tolerance of the stakeholders of the project. And based upon all that information, we put together a recommendation to deliver the project that we feel will hopefully be the most successful. It doesn't guarantee that it's going to be successful, but we're trying to mitigate as much risk as possible. And we don't have any particular one that we can, that's in our pocket that we, would typically go to. We'll look at all of them. So I think that's just an important piece. And like I said, I've got several examples of projects where that's come into play for each of those.
So our last slide here before we jump into some project examples. As an OTR, our role is to do basically these 5 things. And trust me, it's a whole lot more extensive than this, and we'll go into that in a second. But really, we're there to represent the owner's interests in all aspects of the project. At all times, our only thought should be what is in the best interest of the project owner. Not always the project, but the project owner, right? Making sure they're protected both today and in the future. Number 2, treat the owner's money like it's our own. This is our fiduciary responsibility to our clients, is to be just as stingy as if we were doing and building this with our own money. We're not going to just willy-nilly spend something that doesn't make any sense. Actually, in most of our contracts, we're not even allowed to spend money. We're not authorized to spend money. Those decisions have to go back to the owner, but our recommendations are all based around treating the money like it's ours. Drive the schedule. It's always our job as the owner's rep to drive the schedule to meet whatever the owner's need is. Oftentimes we get pushback from the CM, we get pushback from the design team, but our job is to continue to drive the schedule as hard as we can to make sure that we're getting these things done. Because for some, especially for private entities, time is money, right? And so if you're building widgets, the sooner you can be building widgets in a new facility and making more of them, that's money, all right? And so we don't want to just take as long as it takes. Again, our job is to filter and distribute information. And then 5, one of the things I think our company does very, very well is we resolve conflicts all over the place. And so those conflicts are inherent in every construction contract, in every project, no matter what it is. It always stems from some usually small misunderstanding and ends up becoming much larger because people don't want to talk about it. But one of the things that we do is make sure that we're working inside of relationships with all of our clients, both up and down again, and making sure that we are sitting down and dealing with issues as they come up and not letting them fester too long, because that's when problems really start to occur. And I think I can say, David, you may correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've had any lawsuits on any of the projects that we've been working on. We've had some disputes. We've taken those and had conversations with them and always come to a resolution. And often as with a resolution, somebody's maybe not as happy as they would be normally, but to date, out of 9 years of doing OTR work, we have successfully kept all of our clients out of any kind of litigation when it comes to construction projects. So, couple things, David, you want to add to that?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. All right, so let's go through a couple of projects, and David and I will talk through these. Some of them are David's. I may ask Mark to jump in on one or two that are his right now. This project was done in Lawrenceburg. This is our very first project as a firm back in 2011. When we started Veridus, this was our first contract. Ended up being a great project. It's a $55 million at the time event center and hotel. But I think, you know, anecdotally on this, David and I did an after action study on this probably back in 2013 or 14. And due to our involvement and the change orders that we received in the project and those that we negotiated down, we saved our client over $3 million on this project. And there's one that comes to my mind in particular was there was a extended general conditions claim by about 5 or 6 different contractors due to a delay by the owner. There's no doubt that the delay did occur because we were changing from a Marriott branded hotel to a Hilton branded hotel, and there was a bunch of design issues that came up through that. And we received about, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was about $1.6 million in extended general conditions claims from 6 primary contractors. And I remember David and I going down there every other day for a few weeks and meeting with different contractors, and we negotiated that change order alone down to less than $400,000 combined, right? And so just right there, you can see that our fee fit well within that $1.2 million, but we were able to save our client $1.2 million. And without us, our client even told us, we probably would have just paid most of that. We don't know the difference of what should be allowable and what shouldn't be. David, anything else on this Lawrenceburg project?
Yeah, 2 things. I think one, just looking through design, and as changes came through, we were able to identify, there's a bunch of them, but it was around $250,000 worth of design errors that had occurred that we ended up negotiating with the architect for the benefit of the city to get those resolved. And then the other thing that I want to bring up on this one here is we talked about kind of stepping in the gap and working for the owner. And as far as, like, for instance, FF&E and owner furnished equipment being installed. And on this particular project, this is a perfect example. This was a 168 room hotel plus the event center hotel. And the FF&E was not necessarily an issue cost wise, but when we got to the end of the project, the contractor, we determined that they did not have that in their scope, nor did they really want to have that in their scope. So we ended up, with the blessing of the city, we actually contracted with P&G, Hollywood Casino, and we managed that entire process of that, procuring all the FF&E, working with Hilton on that project, as well as Hollywood Casino, and got a contractor involved to come and do all the install for the owner and follow that process all the way through. So that was a pretty big step up. That was not covered. There was a gap there that was not covered, and that's something that we can obviously step in and take care of. So,
sure. So this projects, I should say, there's multiple projects here, is the Yorktown Civic Green and Town Hall. Yorktown is I would say, a suburb community of Muncie on State Road 32 up in Delaware County. We've been involved with them since 2015, 14, somewhere at 15, I think. Helping them just kind of envision what could become of their downtown. And the images on the left and the right are kind of those master plan images. And a lot of this comes from our community economic development group, working with them to help them plan this and understand how they can attract development to their community. The picture right in the middle is their new town hall. They hired us as their owner's technical rep on their town hall construction, as well as the construction of the park that you can see on the right, which is under construction today. And we've had several things that we've saved them time and provided value for them on this project. One of the very first ones came when we started soliciting proposals for the engineering services. And we got a proposal from an engineering firm that they told us, oh, this work, and I'm going to round numbers, but they said this work is about $600,000. That's our proposal, $600,000. So they passed it along to us. We did our analysis on that fee. We looked at the scope, ran the hours, understood the timeline, the schedule, called for a meeting and said, I don't think this is appropriate. This number seems really high. compared to how many people, how many hours, the timeline, everything else we're going to put on this. And literally, with the next sentence that came out of the engineer's mouth was, okay, we'll do it for 500. All right. So, I mean, and we ended up settling at less than that. But I mean, instantaneously, we were able to save them $100,000 just by being at the table and doing an objective analysis of the proposal scope and fee that they received. There's other things in this, like now we're helping them on the construction side. Some of our guys are out there every couple days a week doing some OTR work on the construction of the park. And one of the guys just came to my office yesterday and said, hey, you know, remember that change order we talked about? The contractor gave us a change order for $40,000. I told him that seemed really high, just go ahead and do it time and materials. Well, they did it time and materials, and they gave us a bill for $7,200, right? And those are the kind of stories we do and hear all the time from our clients of us just pushing back a little bit on the contractor or the designer or the engineer or whoever it is and saving tens of thousands of dollars often. And that, you know, out of a $40,000 number, that contractor would have walked away with almost $33,000 in additional profit over than what it really cost them. And a lot of the contractors and people don't seem to care about that. Some of them do care very much and are open book about a lot of things. And we certainly appreciate those relationships. So, but in publicly bid environments, for sure, there is a lot more stuff like that that goes on. And so we've just been able to provide value for Yorktown in that. I think they will continue to hire us and bring us back. Hey, Mark, are you on?
I am on.
Would you mind sharing your two projects here that you're neck deep in right now?
Yeah, so in the city of West Lafayette, we are currently working on both the City Hall project and the Wellness Center project, and both projects are moving along quite smoothly. We've been pretty fortunate with the teams that we have out there as far as the design and construction teams. But as far as, you know, creating value for the owner, as far as savings through coordination or change order process, you know, with City Hall, with it being an adaptive reuse of a 1920s, 1930s school building into this wide open, pretty awesome renovation project. The change orders are pretty commonplace as far as the frequency in which we get them, and we are pretty involved with going through them with a fine-tooth comb. Most recently, we dealt with a change order, or really an RFI that was potentially going to lead to a significant change order with the roof structure. And the feedback from the design team was leading the contractor to do a process that could potentially damage the structure, and the response was going to be, well, we'll just fix the structure T&M, which wasn't the best plan of action for the city. And we went back and made recommendation that the design team identify a method in which he wasn't encouraging the contractor to destroy the structure. And in the process, we've ultimately been able to address the structure and the roof membrane at a no-cost change, and potentially, because of the research that we've done through the process, have identified savings in other areas of the roof portion of the building. So we'll be actually receiving a credit or a deductive change order for some of that work. Over at the Wellness Center, we planned ahead a lot for that project because we knew we were going to release it in two different bid packages so that we could get our foundation in place and that we could get our structural steel ordered before the rest of the design was completed. But knowing that we were going to head down that road, it was decided as a team that we were going to identify allowances should there be gaps in scope, and just being able to have that conversation and have the forethought to say, hey, we know we're going to incur change orders in these potential areas because there might be a discrepancy in scope from bid package 1 to bid package 2. Let's carve out and identify and set aside money now so that it is an emergency when it does come up. And even through the process of running in and running through some of those allowances, ultimately we'll see probably a six-figure deduct or credit back to the client specifically on allowances. Owner contingency or construction contingency on both projects will most likely also then see credits back to the owner. And again, a further conversation to be had at a different date in identifying those construction contingencies versus the owner contingencies and how those change orders are processed. A lot of the conversations that we've had on both projects have been, hey, owner, we think this is an owner contingency item. And we've been able to sit back, review the process in which the change order originated and say, no, this is something that is a architect or engineer error or omission. The contractor missed it, an unforeseen condition. These are not items that fall within my owner's contingency bucket. So really managing those funds creates a lot of value, and ultimately we'll be able to return a lot of that owner contingency back to the client.
All right. So Mark and I are working on the Carmel Clay Public Library one together. And this project, we don't have in construction project pictures yet because it's not in construction. So this is going to go to bid probably in August. But this is a $40 million renovation. I'll just give a real quick anecdote on this one. We helped them negotiate the architecture fees early on in the process, saved probably, I think that was an $80,000 savings immediately right there at the beginning, just from a conversation. Similar discussions with the CM firm that they selected. They're going to deliver this project with the CMC model, or the construction manager as constructor. Again, saved them a little bit of fee there. And then as we're going through some of those gaps that we talked about a little bit earlier, with regard to what's actually contracted and not. David mentioned some of the owner furnished, contractor installed stuff that may not be those gap areas. We found that there was a gap in the design contract that had been presented to the owner before we were involved that didn't include any FF&E or fixtures, furnitures, and equipment specifications. The designer quickly gave us a proposal to do that work. We quickly told him it was way too much, and I think we're in the process of negotiating that down by a percentage of maybe, well, not a percentage, but about another $80,000. And so really where we fit fee-wise in these things, just, I know this is a question that comes up sometimes, is how much do we cost? How much does a good owner's rep cost? That answer can really range from a lot of things. And a lot of times it's anywhere between, I would say, 1.5% to 2.5% of the project cost is where an owner's representative will fall at the end of the day. And I've heard some stories of people charging more and some people charging less, but on average, we kind of find that that's where it falls. The lower percentages are for the higher dollar projects, just because you get an economy of scale. But typically, we have found in almost every project that we've done that our fee really fits inside of the contingency line item. And oftentimes that contingency line item, if managed correctly, is never fully spent down. And so we've been able to make the case for many clients that our fee is actually not an additional fee on the project. It fit in as part of the project cost. And so we think that's just a good story to continue to tell our people here. David, these two are your locations. You want to go through these real quick?
Sure. The first one, made at Plainfield, is actually under construction right now. The photo below is we're in site right now. We're actually, the building pad is established. They're getting footings and footing walls in, foundation walls in right now. It's a 100,000 square foot building. I think the important piece on this one is really how we've stepped in at Plainfield as a member of their team to help drive this project forward. Tim worked on it for about a year before I did. And then I came on after the architect was brought on to work with the partners. And this is a collaboration between Plainfield, Town of Plainfield, Plainfield School Corporation, Ivy Tech, Vincent's, Work One, Indiana Department of Homeland Security, and Hendricks College Network. So there's a lot of players, a lot of stakeholders involved, and worked with the designer, worked with all the partners and design meetings to figure out what the programming for this project needed to be, match the building design to that program, and get it in scope and in budget for the town and for the partners. And we've been able to accomplish that. We've obviously moved forward with the project. I think we've done a fantastic job. The project is going smoothly. Lots of times in the contingency, a lot of those contingencies get spent on projects like this early on. When you get into the site work infrastructure, you find hidden and unknowns. Fortunately, we've not touched the contingency at all on this one. So we continue to work, and there's still a lot of planning to go on this particular one with the partners. But that is that project. The other one is Speedway Town Hall. This is one of the projects that I can go back to and talk about delivery methods and choosing the right delivery method. As far as this one, it started out with an architect and design process and with a construction manager CMA delivery method. Unfortunately, when it was bid, it came in over $1 million over budget. And for all intents and purposes, the project was dead. So we were brought in toward the very end of that process, of the design process. And at that point, when the bids came in, we worked with the owner, had several meetings with the council, and basically what ended up happening was we rejected all the bids. We scrapped that. We went and rebid the project utilizing the BOT. So we changed the delivery method. And on the CMA, obviously the owner has a tremendous amount of risk. They're holding all the contracts. So in this particular case with the BOT, build, operate, transfer, we mitigated all that risk, and we got the project delivered in budget with a guaranteed maximum price for the owner. We're well under construction now and looking at delivering that project in November. So the picture below that town hall, that is Founders Square, which is also in Speedway. That is a 24-acre project development, and we're basically handling the infrastructure. So I'm working for the town as the owner's representative on that. This is kind of interesting, I'm working in collaboration with the developer, which is Rebar, but holding the owner's, the town's interest on this, just because of the incentive that they have involved in the project. Unfortunately, and sometimes this happens, but if you look there, you can see what appears to be 2 roads plus an on-ramp. Unfortunately, that is not new construction. That is, once we started excavation, we found that when NDOT used to have this project, when they had this property, when they abandoned Old 74, they just buried it, like literally just buried the road. All the truss foundations for the highway signs were intact, in place, right next to the highway. And in addition to that, all the spoil piles were completely filled. Many of them were completely filled with debris. I think in total we've estimated somewhere around almost 18,000 tons of concrete debris in those mounds of dirt. So obviously that was a big hidden and unknown. We got a big number from the contractor to handle that. And they came in, basically said if we were to go hard on this to perform this work, this would be our number. We rejected that and did some more due diligence and actually let them go and start working. We provided them an allowance, which was about 1/4 of that amount, and started to have them work on a T&M basis with me going out there continually observing. We got another contractor out there to process all of the debris, and fortunately right now we are almost to the end of that process of addressing this at 1/4 of the cost of what the contractor originally brought it to us for. So, and that number was big, like 7-figure big almost. So that's those 2 projects there.
David, you want to talk for a second maybe about some of the work you've done on MADE and even on the Speedway Town Hall that is not traditionally part of a project, right? Whether it's negotiating leases or, I mean, I know Mark, you're also working on the move of Carmel Clay Public Library and things like that, that we just get involved with that aren't really part of our original scope.
Sure. So with the MADE project, of course, with all the partners, one of the things that I was heavily involved with in collaboration with Brandy Perro with Hendrix College Network was helping with this as well. But really working with all the partners and figuring out, and obviously we had to figure out what their programming was, how much square footage they were going to operate within the building, negotiate those leases. It's really been, we went and visited a bunch of different sites around the state, and getting all of those partners together to collaborate to bring this project together has been a pretty big task. And that's pretty far outside of kind of what you would typically consider an owner's rep role. But, and I continue to do that on a daily basis with all of those partners. I was going to make one other point on that too. If it comes back to me, I'll bring it up. But and on Speedway, on Town Hall, of course, I've been same kind of thing. When they got this building, they had a ton of furniture in there from the previous occupant, and I helped out with that as far as they had somebody on staff or an intern, I believe, that kind of inventoried that. But I've been helping with all of that FF&E and looking at how that's going to be reutilized within the project. And so really I think I go back to that filling the gap that we're not, I think the value really that we can bring to a project is that we are solely dedicated, and I can't say that enough, we're solely dedicated to the owner. We're not trying to build a project. So we're not focused on the design as an architect. We're not focused on building and delivering the project as a CM. We're focusing on representing the owner and looking at the whole project: design, construction, FF&E, leases, in the case of MAID, all of that. So hopefully, and if I can think of the one on MAID, I'll bring it back. But
well, here, this is our last slide because we want to get to some questions from anybody. But so just a last little blurb about us is kind of the way we operate is we work with public and private clients. We clearly have expertise on staff. We have engineers, we have architects, we have construction experts, we have real estate brokers, communication experts. We are stakeholder engagement experts. We love to engage all the stakeholders that surround the project, to understand them, hear them. And at every level of these projects, you're going to see principal level involvement, whether that's me or somebody else, one of our project executives. But we always have high quality people, top to bottom, from our team serving our clients. And our unique approach is people and process, which I didn't really get into. But you heard me mention earlier when I said about relationships. We work in the context of relationships. So we believe that relationship drives everything, and that we can't have conflict resolution or even collaboration without relationship. And that's the people side of our equation. So that's what we have today. Are there any questions out there today?
I was going to mention this about 3 slides ago, but there's nothing in the chat. Feel free to put a question in the chat if you have one, or unmute.
Hey guys, this is Tim Clark. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I do have a couple questions, or maybe it's a couple comments, but as you went through this process, one of the things that in what I do is I noticed that a lot of times when it's not from an owner's rep standpoint, but from a contractor standpoint, you get to the end of the project and the contractor's obviously wanting their final payment. They're wanting their last 10%. How do you guys see yourselves being in this for the long haul, that you're still involved with these buildings with the owners for the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Question, David, you want to take that, or?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, and then if you have anything to add. But as far as that, we didn't even talk about warranty issues or warranty, but we are in these projects for the long haul. I mean, I've got on that, for instance, on the Lawrenceburg project, I mean, that we were out there for 3 years, I think, Tim, total with construction, 2-3 years, but we were called back multiple times and continued to represent them. We will always follow the owner through that year warranty period. We'll come back, review, do an inspection or assessment, if you will, of the project, and just follow up on all those warranty issues and hold the contractors accountable. And in the case of Lawrenceburg, there was even a facade issue where we came back, gosh, it was almost 4 or 5 years later, and reassessed that. So we really strive in trying to be that partner with the ownership team, and we're there for the long haul.
And Tim, what I would add to that, and I hope you've experienced this in West Lafayette, is we try to walk our owners through decisions that will be good for the long-term health of the facility, not just what's good for the budget today, right? So not making a decision that's going to compromise, the functionality or the how to clean something or whatever it is in the future. We want to make sure that we're making good, conscious decisions, even if it means we spend a little bit more money today, but it's not going to cost us a ton of money in 10 or 15 years. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was good. That was good. You kind of led right into my second question, but I'm going to go back to the first question if I can, maybe elaborate a little bit more, because you guys talk about, and you guys have done a great job of setting everything up from the very beginning of this project, or from any project that you guys work on, to, again, when I go back to the long haul on a project, is you do a great job. You talked about, a company knows how to build widgets, but they don't know how to build buildings. I look at this from the standpoint of not only do they not build widgets, but they don't build buildings, but they don't understand where to go when they have maintenance issues, whether it's plumbing, electrical, mechanical issues, windows. Do you guys ever work with customers in a program for the long haul that says, let us help you set up maintenance contracts on buildings and make sure that the contractors are doing what they're supposed to be doing, or better yet, doing what they say they're doing? Because as we all know, that a lot of times, or a certain percentage of times, they'll say they're doing things, but they're really not doing all the things that they're saying. There's no tracking process, procedures. Do you guys ever get into that?
I would say to date, Tim, we haven't really gotten into facility management discussions. However, to David's point earlier, we have had several projects where even 4 or 5 years later, we end up being the first call when the local facilities guy can't figure it out, or doesn't know what to do, or who to call, or where to go. So we'll go back and re-engage to figure out, but it's usually more troubleshooting than it is long-term maintenance. Now, I like the idea. So maybe we should talk offline about another line of business. But I think it's a good service, and clearly something that a lot of people are in need of. Real quick, I got a question on the chat. Is it ever too late to engage an owner's rep into a project? And I think most of you can see that if you can see the chat. So the answer to that is no. I just don't know that you're going to get the value that you might want or need the longer you wait to bring an owner's rep into it. And so getting a real good owner's rep involved at the very beginning will actually help you avoid so many of the pitfalls that so many projects experience. But we have been called in the middle of projects to clean them up or to get them done. And David mentioned one of them, which was the Speedway Town Hall, which they had kind of gone down the road as a CM with the CM agency agreement, and it just wasn't working, and it was all but dead. And so they asked us if we had any thoughts on how this thing might get done. We took a look at what their risk tolerance was and how they were contracted the first time, and said, well, you might want to look at this option. Doesn't hurt us to look at it, so let's take a look and see if we can get it down. But that was, they were already almost done with design in some ways. They had a budget, they had bid out numbers. They were, very concerned about that project. Are there any other questions?
I guess I have one more, not to jump in, maybe I'm speaking too much, but
Sure,
go back to the Speedway project with the 24 acres or the 27 acres that they left the on-ramp on 74. It was all buried. Did you guys happen to go back to NDOT to see if there was money from them that you could get to help on that project?
Absolutely. We absolutely did. That was one of the first. We have several relationships over at NDOT, and we did explore that. And unfortunately, that we were not able to get anything from that. But yes, we absolutely did try to go that route.
All we got, Tim, from NDOT was, well, if you bought something from us, you should probably know and understand that it's going to have crap in it. that was NDOT's response to me. So,
well, at least they responded.
That's right.
Yeah, I was glad they responded. So,
well, I don't see any other questions. As always, our email addresses are on the screen right now. So if you guys have questions or want to reach out, I think we know most of the people that are on here. Please feel free to do that. Just get to us however you can. Call our office, send us a note, send anybody in the office a note that you may know, and they'll find the right person. But we'd love to assist you or your clients moving forward. But thank you again for taking time today to be on this call and on this webinar, and we look forward to connecting with you all in the future when we can meet again.
Thanks for putting it on, guys.
Thank you, guys.